The Legacy Museum of African American History, in collaboration with Lynchburg Parks and Recreation Department, celebrating Black History Month each Sunday afternoon, February 6th, 13th, 20th, and 27th at 3 p.m., presents a virtual talk show written and directed by Teresa Harris, featuring actors portraying Katherine Johnson, Muhammad Ali, Maya Angelou, and Frederick Douglass. And live from the Quincy Armstrong Show, featuring Jemon Haskins as Quincy Armstrong, with Robbie Williams as Frederick Douglass, and recording artist Miracle Thomas. And now, ladies and gentlemen, he is Quincy.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we have one of the most recognizable and distinguished icons in American history. Now, this is the social reformer, abolitionist, orator, writer, and statesman. Let's give it up for Mr. Frederick Douglass. Welcome, Mr. Douglass. You are truly one of the greatest writers and orators in American history. So glad you could join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been on a remarkable journey from being born into slavery to becoming a national leader of the abolitionist movement, and so much more. Now, there's a lot to cover, but let's start at the beginning. Now, you were born into slavery around February 1818. Now, your exact date of birth is uncertain. Is that correct?
That is correct. I have no accurate knowledge of my age, never having seen any authentic record containing it. Most slaves know as little of their ages as horses know of theirs. And it is within my knowledge that it would be the wish of most masters to keep their slaves, thus ignorant.
So as far as you know, few of the enslaved knew of their age?
I do not remember to have ever met a slave who could tell of his birth date.
So where were you born?
Quincy, I was born in Talbot County on Maryland's eastern shore. At first, I thought I was born in 1817, but slave records showed my birth as being in February 1818.
Now, according to these records, you were born Frederick Augustus Washington Bailey.
Yes. My mother was named Harriet. I had no real knowledge of who my father was. I came to believe, however, that he was a white man, most likely the master of the plantation where my mother lived. My relationship with my mother was a distant one because she lived on a different plantation. She died when I was only 7 years old, and I was mostly raised by my grandmother.
So what was your life like during those times?
Well, Quincy, up until about the age of 6, I lived a pretty carefree life. Upon turning 6 years of age, however, my life took a much different direction. That is when I became quite aware of my status as a slave.
How so?
Quincy, the basic premise of slavery is that blacks are inferior and that we were there to do the heavy labor so that the superior whites could spend their time doing more important things. I learned that slavery was an institution where one human being had absolute control over another human being. A person could be on the plantation one day and be sold off of it tomorrow. We had no control over what we did, where we went, what we ate, who we could marry, or even how we worshiped.
How did that make you feel?
Sadly, it felt like death had to be a better alternative than this life. I particularly remember the brutal beating of my aunt, which I witnessed. The master beat her so viciously that I saw the blood slowly ooze from the slits of her back and drip quietly onto the ground. The only sound I remember is the sharp cracking of the whip as it pierced her flesh over and over again. That sound and those crimson droplets of blood are forever etched into my memory.
That must have been a very impactful moment in your life. Now, what other pivotal moments do you recall as you were growing up?
Quincy, I knew that there were free Negroes, and I wanted to be like them. I remember my pathway to freedom began when I was moved to the Auld plantation, where the mistress, despite her husband's disapproval, taught me how to read the Bible. Now, this was highly unusual because slaves were not supposed to know how to read. I even tricked my white childhood acquaintances into sharing their books with me. And because we were all still children, not much was really made of this. Somehow I knew that someday the ability to read and write would be the key to my freedom.
Now, as you got older, you were no longer protected by the cloak of your youthfulness. I read that at at the age around, 16? You had a life-changing altercation with a harsh overseer, Edward Covey. He beat you until you were bleeding severely from your head. Now, at that moment, you vowed never to let that happen again. And the next time that he beat you, you fought back fiercely. What happened after that?
Let's just say he never touched me again.
Okay. Now, obviously, this was a turning point in your life. So, what happened from this point on?
Around this time, things changed drastically. I was moved across the Chesapeake Bay and moved to Baltimore, where I was hired onto a ship and learned the trade of a ship's caulker. This is the first time that I was paid for my work.
But you were still a slave, though, right?
Yes. I was now an urban slave as opposed to a southern plantation slave. I was rented out and paid for my services.
So you were allowed to keep your earnings?
Yes. I was allowed to keep a portion of my wages, so I saved my money. And Quincy, what do you think was my first purchase?
I couldn't even begin to guess.
A book.
Okay, I should have known that. What book was it?
It was the Columbia Orator.
Now, what is that?
Well, Quincy, it is a collection of famous speeches. I memorized every one of them. I practiced the tone of voice in which I would deliver these speeches. I even practiced the gestures, the mannerisms.
Now, besides memorizing speeches, though, what did you do when you were not working?
I discovered a community of free Negroes. I found religious organizations. I also found friends and mentors, which gave me a sense of social identity that I had otherwise not known on the plantations.
And what else did you find?
Well, since you asked, I met and courted a young Negro woman named Anna Murray.
Tell us about her. Well, I mean, what attracted you to her?
I'm glad you asked that as well. Quincy, you see, she was a very quiet woman, and she was very instrumental.
She was a keeper then.
She was a very pious woman. She was also very key into allowing me to obtain my freedom. Anna Murray has gotten very little recognition in the history books, but I must say that without her, there would be no Frederick Douglass as you have come to know me.
Now, speaking of freedom, I understand that you actually met Harriet Tubman, the conductor of the Underground Railroad.
Yes, and I admired her work greatly. However, by the time I met her, I was already free.
Now, how did you accomplish that?
In 1838, Anna Murray and I devised a plan to escape to the North. She sold a poster bed in order to acquire money for my freedom. I was able to acquire papers and a uniform that allowed me to pass for a sailor. You see, Quincy, sailors traveled regularly, and there were a considerable number of Negro sailors. I was able to catch a train undetected to Delaware.
Now, that was still dangerous territory because that was part of the country where slaves could still be returned to the South.
Very much so. And I was able to make it on a steamboat headed for Philadelphia. Now, you see, Pennsylvania was a free state. So I was now a free man, sort of.
I can't even imagine what that must have felt like.
Even I have a hard time describing the elation and relief I felt. We carried on to New York, where I was met by Anna Murray, and there we were married.
But you didn't settle there?
No. We moved on to New Bedford, Massachusetts.
Now, why New Bedford?
Since they built ships there, and I was trained as a ship caulker, it made sense for me to try to build a life there.
And how did that work out?
Well, Quincy, I quickly found out that racism didn't suddenly stop between the borders of the North and the South. White ship workers refused to work beside Negro workers. So even though I was qualified and a skilled ship caulker, I ended up having to take a job as a common laborer in order to survive.
Now, you said that you were a free man, sort of. What did you mean by that?
Even though I was in a free state, the Fugitive Slave Act laws still applied. If a bounty hunter wanted to catch me, he could do so and return me to the South because I didn't have my papers. I was, for all intents and purposes, still a slave.
From what I know of you, I can't even imagine that you left anything up to chance.
Not at all. I learned of the Abolitionist newspaper titled The Liberator, written by Andrew Lloyd Garrison. I soon became aware of the network and the abolitionist movement that existed throughout the northeastern states.
This must have been exactly the answer that you were looking for.
Oh, Quincy, indeed. The Liberator became my meat and my drink. Its sympathy for my brethren in bonds, its faithful exposure of slavery, and its powerful attacks upon the institution sent the thrill of joy through my soul, such as I had never felt before.
Now, in Massachusetts, you and Anna adopted Douglass as your surname. And it was also here that you gained prominence as an anti-slavery orator and abolitionist.
Quincy, I told stories of my life as an enslaved person. These were not imaginings. These were firsthand accounts. And my stories solidified the determination in those to end slavery and those who knew that it was absolutely wrong.
And your impactful speeches got the attention of Andrew Lloyd Garrison. Now, that's the person that had inspired you to become an abolitionist in the first place.
Yes. And he hired me to write for The Liberator.
Now, it was during this time that you wrote your first and most memorable book, Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave.
Yes. And it was published in 1845.
Now that book was a remarkable achievement and among one of my most favorites. It was such a remarkable achievement that some people didn't believe you, a black man, could write such a great piece of literature.
But write it I did. I believe it helped transform the conversation of slavery across the country because it forced people to look at slavery from a totally different perspective.
So you ended up spending 2 years in Europe. Why did you feel the need to go there?
While the speeches and writings did much to open up the conversation about slavery, as well as facilitate the abolitionist movement, it also put a very big target on my back. You see, Quincy, I was still a slave. Fortunately, with the help of my friends and allies, I was able to purchase my freedom and move back to the United States in 1847.
Now, when you got back, you formed your own liberationist paper called The North Star. Tell us about that.
I partnered with Black nationalist and physician Martin Delaney to help form a paper that would be a true reflection of my activism in advocating for the rights of Black people, as well as the rights of women.
Now, that's one of the many things that I admired about, wait a minute. There are several items that I want to mention before I forget. And that is that you were instrumental in influencing Abraham Lincoln to issue the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863. And that gave the Union a little bit more leverage and shifted the domestic dynamics and the international implications of the war. Now, your sons even fought with the Negro Regiment during the Civil War. And I also want to mention that you later served multiple political appointments, including president of the Freedmen's Savings Bank, United States Marshal for the District of Columbia, and Minister, Resident Consul General to the Republic of Haiti. And you later created another newspaper called the New National Era. Whew. You were a busy man. Now, as I was saying earlier, one of the things I admired about you was that you always looked out for the rights of women during a time when that wasn't popular. You were way ahead of your time in many ways.
Well, Quincy, the motto of our paper, and words that I still live by to this day, is that right is of no sex, truth is of no color, God is the Father of us all, and all we are brethren.
You know what? I can't think of a better way to close out this interview right here. Thank you for spending time with us, and thank you for helping our nation confront head-on the ways in which it was failing to live up to its promise. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the great Frederick Douglass.
I'm sending love to everybody. A baby is born in a world so young and innocent, surrounded with love and a family as happy as they can be. Many achievements in your life. You grow up, find a husband or wife. Now it's your turn. Time goes fast, 'cause time waits for no one. And you go to school, learn the golden rule, and you try to socialize. What is normal and acceptable, it's only in your eyes. Taking baby steps, slow and steady, it always wins the race. Sometimes you fall down, but you gotta get back up. There's no time to cry. Oh, yes, we do. Oh, no. Let's get together, stay together. We have to stand for united. We stand. We stand. And divided we fall. Oh, yeah. We Listen to me now. Don't participate in all the hate. It will only bring you down. The color of your skin doesn't matter. Oh no, babe. All that matters is what's inside. Some people will judge you by the things you do. You can't please them all the time. You gotta live your life. Keep up the sacrifice. And don't ever give up the fight. He say, she say, get out my way. I don't have no time for that. You know what you see and what you heard. But they say don't believe your eyes. You better think for yourself before you get caught up in lies. You gotta speak the truth, and even when it hurts, 'cause we need each other. I ain't got no time for hating. Oh no. 'Cause we can't hate, we need each other. Writings on the wall. It's all we gotta stand tall. Oh, yes, we do. Come on. Divided. We're gonna fall, we gotta stay united. Oh, yeah. Stand divided, we fall. Oh, yeah. We need each other. You know what? Sometimes we fall down.